Welcome to the virtual travel summit of Travel Trade Maldives 2020. I'm your host, Dolores Semeraro. Please join me in welcoming today's guest speaker, the resort manager of Digali Maldives, Hassan Saeed. Welcome.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam alaikum. You have been working in the hospitality industry for the last 20 plus years, if I'm not mistaken, with a career spanning from resorts operation, but most importantly, human resources, talent development, and leadership. And today you are the resort manager of one of the most esteemed resorts in the Maldives, Digali. We want to talk about how, for Maldivians working in the hospitality industry, is it possible to work at different level of management and especially in senior position? What did you do differently to reach the position that you have today and your level of seniority?
Thank you, Dolores. Let me start by congratulating you and the Orca Media team for the TTM. I think this is something that they've been doing for the past few years, and it takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of commitment. So congratulations. To have brought it this far is the culmination of a lot of days of hard work.
Yes.
And thank you very much for this opportunity. It's an absolute honor and pleasure for me to be here talking to you all about, especially about something that I'm really passionate about, which is local employment and bringing youth into tourism and travel industry. I started when I was 14 years old. 20 plus is correct, but actually I've been working for the past 32 years, 28 of which is in hospitality. Some of the things that I went through, I didn't go through it deliberately or it wasn't planned. It was the journey that I had to take. For example, the very next year, 1988 is when I came into the industry when I was 14. And then 1989, I was fortunate enough that someone sponsored me for the hotel school. So I was lucky enough to get trained very early on. And then I rejoined the industry in 1990 after the training and went through management training. And through the management training, I was exposed to all operational hospitality, core hospitality areas of a resort. I was in F&B, in culinary, I was in the kitchen, washing pots and cleaning floors.
It's a start. We have to start from somewhere.
Yeah, housekeeping and front office. And I remember 1992 or 93, we had our food and beverage instructor, Mr. Nigel, also. He was hired as a consultant in his resort, and then he invited me to work in F&B again. That's when I reached the sort of managerial or supervisory level of F&B at a very young age. And then I spent a few years in F&B. And then in 2002 or 2003, I had a German-American GM who one day invited me, because I was the food and beverage coordinator. I was the second in command of the department. And then he called me into his office and said, "Young man, are you up for a challenge?" And I said, "Hey, of course, always." And then he said, "I want you to go set up an HR department." Because back in those days, we didn't have an HR department. We had the offices, we had small administrative offices, which are called personnel offices.
Yes.
And before that, the offices were called liaison offices. So I took this challenge, and then I went into HR. I was in HR for another 10 years.
Wow. And especially in a very young industry as well, because back in the days, we wouldn't have that structure that is now supporting, is the backbone of the industry and, you know, the human resources department. So back then it must have been very challenging for you with, you know, with your spirit and your passion to drive this forward.
It was very challenging because none of the HODs had any inkling or any idea of what, you know, proper human resource management was. And for them, it was like the basic carrot and stick approach, nothing else. That was all about, you know, you give them some carrot, beat them with a stick, you know, get them to work. That kind of approach. So I didn't do things differently, like I said, it wasn't planned. But if I look back on my career, I think there's a lot of movement sideways. I went into many different areas of operation to get exposure and experience that, a typical hospitality career is very linear. If you start with human resources, or if you start with especially the core hospitality areas, if you start with food and beverage service, culinary, or housekeeping, you progress through the department to the top, and then you move into management. But in my case, I was moving sideways a lot. I wasn't always going up. There's a lot of sideways movement where I changed myself from one department to the other, from one operational area to the other. Sometime in my career, if I remember correctly, it must have been around the late 90s, or the mid 90s, and later on. I was moving quite frequently, and a lot of managements lost trust in me. And then there's
Oh,
nobody wanted to hire me. And then I was so desperate that I called people and said, "Give me anything you have, I'll take it." I think it's that spirit that got me here. I was willing to take everything that managements threw at me.